Welcome to the On Your Side podcast. I'm Gary Harper. Imagine being in the process of buying or selling a home. It can be an exciting time, but it can also be stressful as well. Scammers know that, and they're using a very deceptive practice to either steal your down payment, make off with your sale proceeds, or in some cases, steal your home right out from underneath you. Sounds crazy, but it's happening across the nation, including right here in Arizona. So today we're talking to Sam Doncaster. He's an attorney and real estate expert for a law firm called Fraud Fighters. He knows exactly how these scams work, and he'll give us all the information you need to keep from losing what might be your life savings.
This is On Your Side with Susan Campbell and Gary Harper, an Arizona's Family Originals podcast.
Okay, welcome to the On Your Side podcast. I'm Gary Harper. Susan Campbell is on special assignment in D.C. She's always
somewhere.
Well, it can't be vacation this time.
She's working.
She is working hard, long hours. When you get sent out of town, it sounds all great and glamorous, but the station really works you. They want you morning, noon, evening, night.
There's nothing really glamorous about this business.
No, there's not. There's not. But listen, today we're talking about scams. You and I, Todd, you're my audio engineer. Thank you for joining us today and filling in for Susan.
I'm the fill-in.
You are, or as you say before, the filler-inner.
I'm the filler-inner.
Yeah. You and I have really, over the course of 20, 25 years, we've really exposed a lot of different scams. Of course, there's the romance scam. We know how that works. Phishing scams. Your Amazon phone call scam. You know, you have some kind of fraudulent cell phone. I mean, we've come across them all. They just don't stop, do they?
No, and I mean it's interesting, but it's also sad that we get to see the continuing change in how scammers are trying to get you to not have your money anymore.
Yeah, I just saw a statistic recently. It says out of every 20 scams that are sent out, one is victimized. So, 1 out of 20.
Wow.
That's not bad.
No, I mean, if you're a scammer, that's good odds.
Oh, absolutely. Unfortunately. So, listen, there's something that you and I have covered before, and it's called the, I guess you would refer to it as the property fraud scam. Affects a lot of people who are either selling their house, buying a house. And you and I remember the lady who claimed she was a senior citizen. She claimed that she was serving papers on a homeowner saying the house belonged to her.
Yeah, and it was crazy because they had security camera footage of process servers and her coming to the house.
Yeah.
And then we confronted her at court. Like she took these people to court to take their house from them.
Exactly. And the weird thing, she was a senior citizen, and she had the exact same name as the homeowner, and she swore up and down it was her house. It was quite the case. Scams like that, they happen all the time. Sometimes people actually wind up losing their house. We had emails like that from people coming in. That's why we're talking to Sam Doncaster. He's an attorney here with Fraud Fighters. Is that right?
Fraud Fighters Law Firm.
Yeah, okay, very good. And you specialize, I guess I will refer to you as an expert in the property fraud scam, because that's really kind of your niche. That's what you do for a living. Tell me, I mean, what's some of the things that are coming across your desk when it comes to property fraud, and is it kind of surprising the lengths that these scammers go to steal large sums of money or even steal someone's house?
So the entire firm exists to help people get their money back when they've been cheated in real estate deals. In terms of the types of fraud we see, fraud is rampant in real estate in Arizona. One of the most common kinds of fraud that we see is what I call SPDS fraud, or disclosure fraud. Basically, you're buying a house in Arizona and you're entitled to get a 7-page disclosure statement. And almost always sellers will lie about the condition of the property there. One of the ways I sort of explain that to folks is there's around 200 questions. So even if somebody is 99% honest, that means they told 2 lies. And the actual result is over 80% of these deals have actionable fraud in Arizona. Some other examples we've seen have been sort of power of attorney scams, especially things that prey on people where English isn't the first language. Somebody goes in, gets a power of attorney, conveys property. A lot of times they'll redeed it and redeed it and redeed it repeatedly, and then eventually take a loan against the property, and that's the way they get the money out of the scam. Other things that we see are just people forging deeds on houses. That's actually especially problematic in Arizona because under our Eviction Act statutes, they actually don't look into title in eviction actions. I think that statute gets misinterpreted sometimes. A lot of times people wind up getting evicted from their own home, and they go into court and tell the judge, that's my house, I own it. And the judge says, well, this other person has a recorded deed, so I'm not really going to look at title. You're evicted even if you do own the house.
That exactly goes to the heart of the example that I was bringing up earlier. She was trying to get a recorded deed that said that she was the owner. How do scammers go about doing that? I mean, where do they even start?
There are different ways. Sometimes people just straight up forge the deed, like write a deed, sign somebody else's name on it, or, write a deed, find the person's signature from the other document and find a way to essentially copy paste it onto what looks like a deed. I've even seen cases where people signed documents before a notary, but the signature was on the very last page that really didn't say anything that important. And the notary notarized the signature, and somebody grabbed that page and stuck it on a deed. Then other times you see it happen. People really do sign it, but it's a scam. You'll have people often go in representing that they can help a person solve a problem they have related to the real estate. And so they get the person to sign documents that they may not understand. People who don't speak English as their first language often wind up being especially vulnerable to this.
Is that demographic really targeted, people who don't speak English very well?
They are definitely targeted. There are groups that go around minority language communities and specifically solicit people and say, hey, for me to solve your problem, I have a couple of documents you need to sign. They're all in English, and the person doesn't speak English, so they'll basically take the other person's word as to what the document says, and that often then winds up leading them to get scammed.
Are they targeting a specific house, or, are they looking for homes that are paid off, or are they looking for homes that still have a mortgage? Is there a house that is being targeted more than another?
Frankly, the homes that have the most equity in them are the most vulnerable, because the way the scammers will get the money out, or one of the ways they'll get the money out, is often they don't keep the house for themselves or even sell it. Often they just take a loan against it. They don't repay the loan. And then once they've taken the loan against it, they've run off with the money. And now you've got a creditor coming along, bringing the enforcement action. And that winds up actually being one of the toughest legal binds possible for somebody who's been scammed, because they've got somebody trying to foreclose on them, and the person running the foreclosure isn't actually the one who scammed them. And so they're basically claiming as a defense that a third party defrauded them. And by the way, that same third party defrauded the lender too.
Absolutely. Wow, that's amazing. So they basically steal your house, or most of it anyway, and then take a second mortgage out, a loan against it, and then make off with the money.
Yeah.
Whoa. And you've
That's
seen
exactly what they do.
And you've seen that happen before, right?
Yeah, I've seen that happen before. Frankly, that happens all the time, and we have multiple cases open right now where it's been some variation on that kind of a fraud. You had a homeowner who either had their house completely paid off or had substantial equity in it, and then somebody came along and was able to get some title-related documents recorded, and then a lot of times they wind up conveying it repeatedly to create what looks like a good record of title, and then they take a loan against the property, and by that time the loan's from a lender, and often there's even title insurance on the loan.
Wow. Let's, I have a neighbor who sold his house not long ago, or at least he was trying to, and he was going through one of those, and I don't want to bring up names, but they basically, they buy your home and then they go ahead and immediately flip it, put it on the internet. And, he thought he was getting X amount of dollars and everything was set and done. And he goes to the closing table and it's like $25,000 less than what he was expecting. How often does that happen?
That's actually another really common scam. And basically, you've got a whole class of fraudsters who do things like that. And they're essentially relying on the fact that, sellers who are using that type of a company, like sellers who are knowingly and intentionally taking less money to get a quick sale. They really want the quick sale, and so a lot of times, and they often have a very strong motivation for wanting it, and so a lot of times they'll just basically do that. They'll get to the closing table and then try to renegotiate the deal, basically with the seller being at gunpoint or very near it. And they rip people off by taking advantage of the fact that they really need to close fast, and they don't have the time to go and force the original deal.
What's one of the craziest things that you've come across that somebody came to you and said, this happened to me when it comes to property fraud?
Frankly, I think one of the craziest things that I've seen when it came to property fraud has been somebody lying about toxic conditions in the property. I've seen cases where people have been either seriously injured or even died because they were unknowingly exposed to that type of a condition.
Wow. Hey, I want to move over to emails. And I've aired numerous investigative reports on this topic, and that's where people are selling their house or maybe even buying. They think they're dealing with their escrow company or maybe a title company, probably the title company. And let's just say we'll use your name. Somebody's used to dealing with Samuel, and they keep getting these emails from Samuel over at the title company, and then the scammer somehow infiltrates the email, and then he kind of poses as you. He poses as the title person, and has a slightly different email address. So maybe instead of Samuel at Gmail, it's Samuel at Yahoo or whatever. But they actually try to dupe these people into wiring large sums of money, thinking that, the wire is for a home purchase or a home sale or maybe getting the proceeds. And they fall for that. I mean, we had one person who almost fell for over $100,000. And luckily they realized the email was not the same match to the email that they were always dealing with. Tell me about that one.
Yeah, that's a massive problem. We actually have some cases ongoing helping people who that actually happens to. Basically, the way it works is the hacker targets a title or escrow company, or a lot of times they'll even target a realtor or a real estate brokerage. Basically, anybody involved in that real estate process who has a vulnerable email server can get targeted. Once somebody gets in there and you have access to the emails, you sort of see who's got a pending real estate transaction and who they're expecting to get wire instructions from, and then they can spoof the email. And frankly, that's really easy to do. A lot of times they're not even as sophisticated as the example you were talking about, right? A lot of times there are things that are like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 at weirddomain.com, but they'll set it up so it displays as the person's name. And so because they've got it set up to display as the name, if you're not being really careful, you see the display and not the real email address, and you think you're talking to somebody who you're not. It's basically like a way of impersonating somebody. Also, sometimes people do, especially in situations where somebody's using like a generic email handle where anybody can go open up an account, they'll go in and spoof it or write something similar, or they'll go like register a similar domain name to the title or escrow company and send along bad wiring instructions. And, one of the tricks with wires is they're very difficult to reverse once they happen. And so you get your money wired to who knows where. Probably it's getting wired several more times fast once the bad guys get their hands on it. And then it's just really tough to go trace where that money went.
When I refinanced my house 2 years ago, my back and forth with the mortgage company was, every time I had an email that came from them, it always very clear at the top said, beware of, fraud scams. I guess they're trying to get ahead of this to warn people, but what are some tips to kind of keep in front of this and prevent yourself from becoming a property fraud victim? What can you do?
Right. Well, so with respect to the example we've been talking about, the wire fraud thing, any email that you get that you think is from your realtor or your title or escrow company, particularly if it's about wiring instructions or where to take or send money, go click on the actual email address and look at what it is and verify that it's the right one. Another thing that I also recommend, frankly, is calling to confirm wiring instructions. You get wiring instructions from your title company, call the escrow officer to confirm them, because there is somebody out there who wants to spoof your escrow officer's email address and get you to send your down payment money to the wrong place. Another thing that, in terms of property fraud, more generally, how can you protect yourself? Hire lawyers early. Especially if you're looking at a document that you don't completely understand, make sure you read the whole thing, hire a lawyer to walk through that with you and talk to you about whether or not that makes sense and what the risks are.
I don't think many people actually hire a lawyer when they're buying or selling a house, because they're really putting a lot of confidence into their real estate agent who is getting paid and representing them.
They are. Very few people actually do that, but I can't tell you how many times I've seen where somebody, falsely represented themselves, and for instance, got a power of attorney signed. And if you hire a real lawyer to look at that, frankly, you can narrow a power of attorney to the specific problem you want somebody to solve for you, and include things like it does not include the power to convey real estate. And if you've got somebody who you don't want to just give away your property on you, it's good to include that kind of a restriction in there. If you're giving a power of attorney to somebody who's, say, coming along and saying they're going to sell your house for you, first of all, no realtor needs a power of attorney. Second of all, even if there is something that you think they need one for, restrict it to a particular purpose.
Right. What's the largest dollar amount that you've come across when it comes to property fraud?
Oh, wow. It's been in the multiple millions. I'm not sure the exact amount, but I've seen it up into the multiple millions. Basically, however much somebody can spend on a house, you can get cheated on that deal.
And what's the number one scam? And we've talked about a couple of them already, but what's the number one scam used to steal people's money? Is it the wiring scam, or what is it?
By commonality, I would say the number one scam is non-disclosure or false or misleading disclosure in purchase and sale transactions. I think the vast majority of sellers will lie about something, and that often winds up costing buyers big.
Yeah. Not long ago, I think, in fact, somebody did write me saying that the inside of their house was just completely destroyed by termites, and the disclosure said they had no termites. So that's probably come across your desk quite a few times.
Yeah, I've seen things like that. I help people with that kind of a problem regularly. Frankly, if you want to respond to that person's letter and tell them to give my law firm a call, that's within the core of what we handle. Mm-hmm. And yeah, that happens all the time. Termites, mold, arsenic in wells, environmental toxins, undisclosed lead paint, rodents, pests, you name it, people lie about it.
Is there a particular time in the real estate market, whether it's really, really hot or if it's kind of cold, is there a time in the market where scammers really like to target their victims?
we've recently come off of a very hot market where people were waiving disclosure statements that led to more non-disclosure. Also, in very hot markets, transactions are often happening faster, which creates a favorable environment for all sorts of scammers. One of the number one signs of a fraudster is they have some sort of a story or an excuse for why there's time pressure, and they're trying to push you or bully you into going fast. And if somebody's doing that, that is a warning sign of fraud. And I think in the really hot markets, it's easier to wind up doing that. As things are slowing down, one of the things that I think we're going to start seeing more often in fraud is you're going to have more sellers as victims than buyers. Like, basically, it's easier to target somebody for fraud if they perceive themselves as being less powerful. And so in a seller's market, buyers are going to be more vulnerable. As we transition into more of a buyer-oriented market, the sellers are going to get more vulnerable.
All right. Well, if there's anything I want people to understand, and that is, be extra careful when you're selling or buying a house. Make sure the emails that are going back and forth between you and your title company is really the title company and the escrow company. Hey, Samuel, I appreciate you being on the On Your Side podcast. If anybody wanted to find out more about you or your law firm, is there any websites or social media or anything they can find you at?
You can go to fraudfighterslawfirm.com.
All right. Thanks so much, man. It was a great conversation. I hope people have learned from this. And I know I have, but selling and buying a house can be very, very stressful. And that's where the scammers are trying to take advantage of people, getting them while they're down. So, hey, have a great day. And again, thank you for being on the On Your Side podcast.
Well, thank you.
The On Your Side podcast is produced by Brad Denny. Our audio engineer and editor is Todd Martin. Segment producer is Colin Stanton. And I'm Gary Harper.
And I'm Susan Campbell. If you have a problem you can't resolve, maybe we can. Send us a message through azfamily.com or our AZ Family mobile app. Look for the On Your Side section and leave us a message. Thanks so much for listening to the On Your Side podcast. And if you like it, leave us a review. We'll see you next week.
On Your Side is on Good Morning Arizona every weekday morning at 6:45 and 7 o'clock, and every weekday evening on Good Evening Arizona at 4 and 5 o'clock. You can also catch it on Arizona's Family News at 9 on 3TV every weeknight.